This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Port Orford City Planning Commission into order. It's 3:32. The roll call, we have Commissioner Rossi, Commissioner Lovendall, Commissioner Burnt, and Commissioner Thielen are present. Commissioner Head is out of town and has a conflict of another meeting, so she's not able to attend. She sent me an email. Are there additions to the agenda? Then let's move on to approval of the minutes. Are there anything on the minutes?
Yes, Commissioner Burns. I don't recall on number 2 that I requested information on the status of the effluent rainwater. I'm wondering if it was someone else
Okay.
or if it was misunderstood.
I think we probably could just, unless you remember that you said, made another comment you'd like to have on the record, I think we should just probably strike that first sentence.
Let's strike it.
You do that? Okay, anything else? Then, do we need a motion to, I think we need a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes as submitted. I'll second.
No, so Commissioner Lovendall, excuse me, made a motion and Commissioner Burnt seconded it. Commissioner Rossi,
Yes, approved.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Approved.
Commissioner Burnt,
Yes.
and Commissioner Thielen, yes. It was seconded by Commissioner Burnt. Okay. Announcements and communications. Ordinarily, the chair comments come first. I'd like to just make a couple of comments. And actually, planning commission comments isn't usually on our agenda. It's usually just the chair and the city planner or city representative.
Actually, I usually only speak down here in other business.
Oh, okay,
I
so,
think we maybe have it up.
okay. We have been, the assistant planner has been speaking in the beginning,
You
but
can speak whenever you want. I'm not usually up there.
okay. I think on our previous agendas, it said assistant city planner.
Okay, we'll work on it.
But we'll work on it. Okay. I did have a couple comments. Two commissioners went out and gathered some information on distances between short-term rentals, as we had asked, and on parking. And I believe that the information was, they couldn't gather all the information because we did not have a complete list of rentals. So the city is going to give us like a certified list or a real list. So we'll be able to move on that and make our report to the city council. The second thing I wanted to mention, Commissioner Lovendall did this morning submit an information piece on inspections and the distance requirement for the short-term rentals, and that'll be on the agenda next time. The interim city administrator asked me to do an update for Daniel Kearns on the status of the recommendations that the planning commission has made so far, along with the city council recommendations, which I have given to him and to the attorney, and who is actually on vacation. That's why we're not dealing with it this time, is it'll be dealt with at the next meeting. So at the next meeting, we should have a report from him on the status of where we're at. Are there any comments from the public on the agenda items? And are we online here? Do we have?
Yes, yes, we are online.
Here,
Yes, that'll be the hearing.
This agenda is not.
Okay, thank you. So you will have a chance to speak. This is your agenda item, I believe. But I was just wondering if anyone had any other comments. So I don't see anybody, I don't even see anybody online. Are we able to see who's online?
We have two callers calling in, a caller known as 007 and one Mr. Walter White.
Okay, but they're not asking to speak.
Alter my speaker.
Okay.
Part of that.
Oh, okay. All right. Comments, so let's move on to the public hearing. A minor partition, POP 23-01. And so I have not done a public hearing before, so please bear with me if I'm get a little confused here. But I do have a document here to follow. Do I need to bang the gavel? This is a public hearing? I kind of like to bang the gavel anyway.
We can tell.
So I am Greg Thielen. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. All the planning commissioners are volunteers appointed by the Port Orford City Council. Our role is to conduct public hearings and make decisions about land use matters in the city of Port Orford. We have to apply the law. We can't vary from or change the law as part of this hearing. We're required to base our decisions on the law that exists when the application was filed. Do any members of the Planning Commission have any conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationship with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question? No, I don't either. So have any of the planning commissioners discussed the application with any of the applicants or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as the visit to the site in question?
I drove past.
Drove past.
I did as well. I went to the site.
right, I'm familiar with the site.
Yeah.
I've been by it.
I'm familiar with the site too. I haven't driven by lately. Thank you. Okay. How to testify and participate. ORS 197-163-36 states that failure to raise an issue in the hearing, either in person or by letter, or failure to provide statements or evidence sufficient to allow the decision maker an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to higher judicial authority on the issue. So citizens may provide verbal testimony or on the GoToMeeting, so online. If the decision making body, that's us, declares that the record is to remain open for a time period following the public hearing, then written evidence and documents may be submitted in accordance with the instructions provided at the hearing. The procedures of the hearing, we'll have a staff report first, then we'll have proponents or applicants will testify, we'll have opponents testify, we'll have questions, and we can ask questions at any time. We on the commission. If there's new information, we'll have a chance to respond. And the proponent or applicant will speak last. Then we'll close the public hearing and we'll discuss among ourselves, what decision we want to make. So first would be the staff report.
Hello, Planning Commission of the City of Port Orford. I am Joseph Harrison, the new planning assistant slash technician. I've been called a few things in the city office, so if you don't know what to call me, you're not the only ones. Today, I'm here to present my findings on the minor partition number POP 2023-01, Assessor's Map P32S R15W, Section 32DC, Tax Lot 1500, owned by Ergott's Bluff. It's also known as Lot 1 of the Lindwood Addition. Today, we are looking at partitioning it into two separate parcels. The land in question is along Idaho, with the nearest intersection being Idaho and Madrona. You can turn to page 16 if you would like an aerial view, or page 29 if you would like an assessor's map. Okay, I've gone through all the things. First off, the property is located completely within commercial zoning, and within commercial zoning, the use of housing is explicitly allowed outright by Port Orford Municipal Code 17.12.30, subsection B1. Additionally, he has submitted extra paperwork that wasn't necessary for the partition because we have made requests. Moving on to the provision of sewer and water and adequate utilities on his plat. If you would like to turn to it, it is page 21. On it, he has taken full account of the water lines, the sewer lines, the electric lines, and has gotten the approval of everyone involved other than the water, because we are currently in the water moratorium. And the water moratorium is attachment B. In it, there explicitly is we're not allowed to allow new or additional services, meaning we can't okay new properties to hook up to city water. However, within the ordinance slash resolution for the moratorium, there was not a provision put in place to allow wells as an alternative source of water. So we need the Planning Commission to grant approval of that as an alternative source of water. His tentative plat has everything on it that would be necessary for a plat and additional things, including contour lines showing that the property is incredibly flat and easily divisible, and that it doesn't have any unique or noteworthy geologic features other than one tree, which the applicant has already verbally agreed to have removed. Topograph already removed. Additionally, there was a document in the planning packets that didn't address the ordinances of ORS, or I should say Port Orford Municipal Code 16.12.10 and 16.12.50. He has since signed a document that verifies that those two things will not be an issue. For those of you who are curious, those two provisions are saying that the property hasn't been divided within the past 5 years and won't be for another 5. And I already covered the contours. So in summation, my findings are that the partition is allowed outright, and it should be allowed, other than the hiccup of I technically can't okay a well, and because I can't okay a well, I can't guarantee utilities to the property. I believe the Planning Commission, however, does have the authority to okay it as an alternative means of water. And that is basically the only condition that has not already been addressed directly with the applicant. The pine tree he's already verbally agreed to. He signed the document that covers ORS 16.12.10 and 16.12.50. He's verbally agreed that there's going to be a well once the county agrees, says it can go in. And yes, I believe that accurately summarizes my findings. If you have any questions for me, or if I failed to address something, I apologize. It is my first time giving a presentation on my findings, so I'm a little bit nervous if that didn't come across.
I have a question about the pine tree. Is that, so you say there's a verbal agreement to take the pine tree down? Was that a hazard or was that, I was curious about why that would be.
So the pine tree, if I can pull it up on the flat, you can't really see it, unfortunately. If you turn to page 21 on the packets, you can see the pine tree is the 47 pine tree near the 20-foot access easement. It was asked to be removed so that way the tree would not block the easement in case of a fire truck needing to access the property.
Then my question is why is that a verbal agreement instead of a written agreement?
Because it didn't feel the need to get it written. It came up during a conversation when Mr. Vernon came in to address some other paperwork. Additionally, in subsequent paperwork, he has made note that it will. It just at the time of drafting, it had not been the case.
So it's something that would be pretty obviously that you would need to do.
Yes,
That's what the conditions are always on the, there's always options for conditions for the planning commission at the end of the staff report. And so that's one, and there'll be water issues and things to talk about.
So
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
yeah, I was going to ask about the tree removal as well. Is it the only, if it's because it blocks access to the parcels and possibly fire truck, is there another route that could be taken to allow the tree to remain?
I believe I just heard a no. It'd be a question for the applicant.
We'll ask the question of the applicant then.
Okay, okay.
Are there any other questions for our technician?
Yes, I was wondering how many, if you have an idea, how many wells exist in the commercial zones? The 4C?
I do not have enough information to even
Okay,
feel comfortable venturing a guess. Yes, I don't feel comfortable venturing a guess at this time.
okay.
Yes, Crystal?
We've been talking with Gary Minneman, who's been the interim city manager. And he's been working with the council and they are working on what their policies are. And that would be one of the reasons they need to have policies, so that they will know how many wells there are. And so that people in the future will know how many wells and where the wells are. And so all of this is kind of not completed yet, but I think today you could decide what you want to happen with this particular permit. And then the condition could be on it that it has to comply with the city council.
Okay.
I think it's a resolution.
And then the other question that I had pertains to the sewer and where that would be located for these parcels, especially if there's a well.
The sewer line, or the closest available one, is on the opposite side of Idaho. I believe it was addressed in my findings. It just wasn't something I covered during my presentation. If I understand everything correctly, which I just started, so this might not be correct, but I believe that when the applicant puts in the sewer line, he will have to fill out a right-of-way permit in order to go into the city's right-of-way because the sewer line is on the opposite side of Idaho. So that is a good distance away from the
Okay.
property.
Thank you, Joseph.
Happy to help, Vice Chairman, or Vice Chairperson.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes, in Joseph's presentation, he mentioned that the commission would have to grant approval for a well. And I wondered, do we have the power to do that? And if so, I would want it to apply just to this permit and not set a precedent.
Yes, Crystal?
This is one of the, we maybe misspoke a little bit. It's not an approval that you can grant at this time. It will be a tentative approval with conditioned upon doing what the city council determines.
Okay. Thank you.
So kind of an ancillary point to Commissioner Bernard. So we know there are wells in town. We know there are at least one or two or three. I have heard that there is one at the car wash. Okay. Any other questions?
I just have a quick comment on that. I can confirm there are wells on properties in town.
Oh, pardon me, I do have one other question. At one point, I had heard that wells were allowed as secondary water sources, not as primary. Is that fact or fiction? Anyone know?
My reading of the code is that every property has to have water and sewer service. And countervailing is the ordinance that says we have a water shortage and we cannot hook up water to a house. So there's two, we've got a rock and a hard place here.
Yep.
Something's gonna
Okay.
give. Anything else before we move into the testimony? Okay, the applicant may just say your name and tell us what you got.
Well, thank you for having me and listening to me.
And please speak into the microphone too,
At least
so that we can
you have
record
a-
these for the.
Hello, my name is Guy Vernon. I represent Eagles Bluff LLC, which I'm the sole member of this LLC I own. And I'd just like to tell you what I'm trying to accomplish here and ask a couple questions. As members of the Planning Commission, are you familiar with Executive Order number 23-04?
No.
Okay. Well, I only brought one copy, but I would encourage you to write this down and make yourself. It says, and this is directly from Governor Kotek earlier this year. I'm sure Crystal's aware of it. She's up on all this stuff. Oregon is experiencing a severe housing shortage, which increases housing costs, reduces housing availability, is the primary cause of homelessness crisis in the state of Oregon, hinders the state economy, prosperity, and prevents too many Oregonians from maintaining housing stability, which is the foundation to every family's health, well-being, and economic stability. The greatest housing shortage is a housing shortage that is affordable to households earning below. And it goes on to say that we need 140,000 homes built in Oregon just to reach stability. That's how many we're short. At present, and I'll kind of skip this, this is rather lengthy, but since you're on the Planning Commission, I think it would be very important for you to understand the crisis that Oregon is facing here. And the governor and her council believes it stems primarily from the conflicts that builders, developers are having with the codes and the city councils and the not in my backyard people. And the causes, which is, as she states, is the number one cause of homelessness, the number one. And so I'm not making it up. I wish I would have. And so I'm an affordable house. And I've already proposed on this site an 8-unit affordable housing project, which got denied. And I was told over a year ago that that would get resolved through the Planning Commission. I'd be able to move forward. After 1 year of waiting, nothing has happened. There's not been any code changes. There's been any amendments. The representative, I have a hard time, Hoy, said that she would help, she would visit here. Anyway, nothing's happened. So what I'm trying to do is what is allowed on this property. And so I've built for over 40 years, and the only answer to affordability is smaller lots and smaller homes. There's no other way to do it. The code that unfortunately we're dealing with here in Port Orford is maybe, it's quite antiquated. We'll just put it that way. And so the nice thing about this commercial is there's no minimum lot size. You wouldn't be able to create these smaller lots, build smaller homes in the regular R1 and R2. So anyway, I have one copy of this, if you guys want to look at it.
Would you restate the number?
It's 23-04, executive order. And yeah, I don't want to take up your time, it's like 4 pages long. You can leave it, you can copy it, whatever, but as a planning commission, I think, basically what the governor's saying is, figure out how to build more houses in your cities and counties because it's desperately needed. And I agree with her completely. And so I have a lot of history with the city, with this property. And so, the former administrator, Jessica Ginsburg, and John, the public.
Isidore? John Isidore, City Water?
Right, yeah. I met with them and I said, okay, what can I do with this? And they said, well, you can go ahead, you can partition it. I said, because what I had intended to do with it was, there's 2 lots, there are 4 houses on each one. And that's not allowed by the code. So, and I said, well, you have a water moratorium. And I also have another customer that's drawing plans on another home that he built in. And both of us were given the same answers. You're allowed to drill wells. And so I've gone forward and spent thousands of dollars with engineers to prepare the petition. I have a packet that Joseph has looked at for a small home that we're going to try to build on this property. And then when Jessica left, that policy left with her. I understand it because, I don't know what happened. But anyway, it's really a bad spot for me. If they would have just said, you can't do anything, I wouldn't have spent all this money moving forward and doing these things. And when Joseph, alerted me of this, I was pretty shocked. I was like, well, and I called John, and John had informed me. He said, well, Jessica, I, and Shayla, the attorney, had talked about this, and they all felt that this was a suitable solution. So we could go forward with housing in the interim until the moratorium or whatever problems that need to be resolved. And so, obviously, I'm a builder. There's been I've talked to the realtors at Neath the Wind that, helped me purchase this property. And they concur with me that as they sold these vacant properties to people in Port Orford, that they got the same information that you would be, and that they would be able to drill wells and move forward with building projects. And I can just see a really big problem, it's kind of, if people have purchased on the city's word and then it's not. So anyway, that's the background. That's why I'm here, and I hope you approve it. I understand Joseph's position. He can't sign off on this, and but if you want wells, then basically there's we're not going to be able to build any more anything, right? So you're in direct conflict with what the governor wants to do. Anyway, do you have any questions? You had a question about the tree.
Yes.
And that particular design, there's not really any other place to put that road. And then in past applications, trees have been brought up, and it was my understanding, we ruled that there is no tree ordinance per se in Port Orford, and that's the way I understand it. Do you know of any tree ordinance, Joseph?
Off the top of my head, no.
No.
No, I don't believe there's tree ordinance.
Right.
I think the issue would be the fire.
Right, no, well, we
access.
plan on, it's obviously gonna impede entrance into there, so, the fire department wouldn't sign off on that, if there's a tree in the middle of it.
Right.
I like trees myself, I like to try to save them, and it's a shame what's happened with, oak disease and cedar disease. We try to keep as many as possible, but unfortunately, some of them have to go. But personally, I try to work around, but this one, there was no way to work. Does that answer your?
I do, yes, and I do have several other questions.
Okay.
So have you done any test holes to determine if a well is feasible there?
I don't believe you can test it. My understanding is the wells are between 65 and 100 feet. When I talked to Apple Well Drilling, who I have a contract with, what they do is they look at, the water master keeps a log of all the wells, and there's a well on Madrona, which is just a couple blocks, is what he told me. And then Greg had mentioned there's a well across the highway at the car wash. And so the assumption is that, they're drawing from an aquifer. And so when he looked at it, his words were, this is a no-brainer, right? He goes, you'll get your water.
Okay. And how many units are you thinking would be on this property? These
On
parcels?
this particular property, 2. There'll be
Okay,
when we partition it, it's shown, be one there, one there.
and would each parcel then have their own well?
I believe, what I'm gonna try to do is to limit the, when I talked to him, he said you can have what's called a 3-party well. You have a well agreement, and so there would be one well that shares the parcel to the north and the 2 parcels to the south.
Okay. And would you have to have some kind of holding tank of some sort?
Well, they'll probably, it depends. I talked to him about that. It's a very good question because I don't know the answer to. And it depends on the flow of the well. And if the well has enough flow, they can put in a pressure tank and that's it. If the well does not have sufficient flow, then I would have to put in a holding tank. And so then it would fill that and then, it would run. And so that would give capacity enough for the 3. So, yeah, that is a possibility. He said that the well at the car wash, I can't remember, it seemed like a lot of gallons per minute to me. He goes, it's a very good well. And he said the other one that they looked up on, but I couldn't answer that question. And I asked the well driller the same thing, and he goes, well, if it comes out with the other 2, you will not need that. But there's a possibility I may need a holding tank.
Okay, and if you discover that there's not a good source of water there, then what?
Well, you can't see it on this property, but I also own lot 2, which faces Highway 97, which does have an existing water source on that. And what John said, if push came to shove and we couldn't get water, we could use that until the moratorium. But then I couldn't build on that.
Okay.
There was an existing house, this property, Lisa, it's right north of the Cape Blanco RV park.
Right.
And so there was an existing house on that lot, and a water meter, and years ago, it got torn down, but the water service is still there. So there is, like a last ditch if that happened. But then what that would do, it would cause that one.
It would only be for the one parcel, though.
Right, it would,
Okay.
you couldn't build on that. So that's my understanding.
Okay,
So,
okay. Thank you.
any other questions?
I have a question. On a three-party well, and you're building it, you plan to sell these homes, correct? That you're building?
Yes, yes.
Is there some issue with getting funding or loans?
I don't know. I don't believe. I've done that, I came from the Central Oregon area where, rural properties where we didn't have 60-foot wells, we had 600-foot wells. And the aquifer is way down there and it's very expensive to drill the wells. You're looking at $50,000, $60,000. So it's quite common for parcels to go to, 3 parcels to go together, and I don't believe there's any financing.
I was looking at property in Salem that was on, and there was some problem with that. That, of course, is not our issue. So,
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Vernon. Can you just estimate what a cost of a well, a 60-foot well that would serve those that property?
Their estimate with equipment is about $10,000.
10,000 per,
Right, the well is about $100 a foot. I think that's what it came out to. It was around $6,000. But then you have your equipment, and so yeah, it's about $100 a foot, roughly.
thank you, that seems fair. I was just curious.
And you're kind of writing them a blank check because you don't know how, they just keep going until they find water, and there's sometimes you end up with an expensive hole in the ground that doesn't help. But he doesn't feel that he being the well driller in this particular area.
one more question. The 2 homes that you plan to build, you said would be affordable housing. And what price range do you feel is affordable housing?
Probably a shocking number. We're going to try and keep them under 300,000, which I agree with you doesn't seem affordable,
No?
but in today's world, I've been doing this long enough that I remember selling homes for $69,000. You can't even buy a piece of property. It's staggering. I look at the next generation and go, nobody. And then my original plan was to try to, with the 2 lots are 4 on each one. And, we were trying to get those under $250,000. But, this one we're going to put a garage and stuff on, and it's not a real big house.
And what kind of square footage?
It's, I got it right here. You remember how much square footage that was?
There's a drawing house on there.
It's roughly, I think in the 600 square foot range.
They're all the same house. They're all the same house. I saw the drawing. They're all the same design.
Well, for this, we've only drawn one drawing for the first house. In Seattle. So I don't have a drawing for the second.
Pretty good. Second.
No, and the second lot has a little bit more building area. I was actually thinking maybe of trying to put a small duplex on there. But that's nothing in stone yet.
You have any more questions for Mr. Vernon?
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Vernon.
Okay, so here,
All right, thank you.
Do we have any proponents of the application that would like to speak? No one online? Then, let's see. Then any opponents of the application? Would they like to speak? Yes?
I'm not an opponent, but I have a question.
I think you should be called, whatever you want. Just come up to the microphone, please, so that we can get it on the record. It doesn't matter if you're an opponent or you're somewhere in there, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
State your name, please. and-
Cynthia Freeman. I live at 250 15th Street, Port Orford. So I have a question about wells, because that's been really unclear to me, about wells in the city proper. So it sounds like it's not clear whether, it sounds like there's some existing wells in town, but it's been a question since I've been here about, is it possible to drill a well in the city? Just because the water issue, it's prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. And I put forward with Jessica Ginsburg last year, for people that are trying to save water, preserve water. I use the minimum amount of water. And I was met with kind of, no, we're not doing that. But I think that people that are trying to save water, and I'm not trying to save money necessarily, that would be nice, but I think people that are working hard to save water in town and, care about what's going on with the infrastructure. I want to pay my fair share as a homeowner, but I also wanted to know if it's possible to drill a well in town. And I have heard so many mixed things that, and now I'm hearing that there are wells in town, and there's this proposal here right now about drilling a well. So I'm just a little confused.
Can you ask her a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get you, sure.
So is your question whether you can actually physically drill a well, which Mr. Vernon has already probably answered as best he can? Or is your question, are you allowed to do it?
Are you allowed?
Okay, so that's why there's been so much discussion here, because the code of Port Orford does not allow that. But we're in a situation where the city can't provide what they're supposed to provide as per their code. Therefore, when we're processing land use applications and building permits, we have asked the city council for them to clarify through a resolution or an ordinance what people can do. Okay. And then as people come in, we can apply that to what's happening with the building permits, the division of property, things like that. So the answer is currently the code doesn't permit it. And to change the code, we either have to do an emergency change, or we would have to go through a bunch of rigmarole to change the code. But the city council can make their own policy about what people can be doing and override the code. That's what they have to do in emergency situations.
So Crystal, would this be considered a conditional use situation?
Well,
If
that's
someone
why
applied
we
for
did
this?
as a conditional use, because this particular property and what Mr. Vernon is doing is pretty simple process. And everybody is allowed to do petitioning or subdivision if they can make it fit on the property and things like that. So we're not stopping anybody from doing that. I mean, we wouldn't be able, I don't think there's anything that would allow us to do a moratorium on building, nor would the city want to do that, probably. But the city council has a issue they have to resolve and give guidance. We shouldn't be allowing wells by gossip or, yeah, or, you know, this guy can do it and this guy can't. So that's why that's why this is before the planning commission, so that you guys can, so it's all in the record and you guys can make a condition of what needs to be done.
Thank you. I apologize, Ms. Freeman, for our digression. And we really aren't here to answer your question. I think if you stick around, you'll find out a lot of what's going to happen. I think you'll find out, because we're going to discuss this in detail when we get to discuss it. So we can't really answer your questions. It's not really what we do. Thank you for speaking. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. Question, proponent or applicant speaks last. If you would like to speak again, Mr. Werner, you're welcome to.
I kind of think I said everything I need to say unless there's any more questions.
Okay.
I haven't stated my case, but thank you for asking.
Yes. Well, I'm going to close this portion of the hearing then, and we will, so when the planning commission will then deliberate about what to do with the application. During the deliberations, the planning commission may reopen the public portion of the hearing if necessary to receive additional evidence before making a decision. So we're going to now just talk and we're going to make a decision. I'd like to kind of follow Robert's rules or keep it a little bit organized, but yeah, let's.
I think
Crystal?
what you want to deliberate toward is the findings. And the findings in a planning situation are the application of the code to what the applicant is proposing. So a finding, Joseph has made a lot of things in here that you could be using as findings. And you could accept his report as it is and make some extra findings having to do with wells and water. Or if there's something else that is in question here, I don't think there is. So because anytime you make a decision, you have to make findings. That's part of the whole statewide planning program. And so as you go through the application, you can kind of look at each page and see if you agree with what Joseph has said, or if you have any questions about it. And if you do, it's time to bring them up and talk about it. Because you, as planning commissioners, have the right to, you don't have to accept what Joseph or I or anybody else says. You are decision makers. And if you don't agree with something, then you just make a finding that changes that facts and criteria seem to cause us to want to have something different.
Thank you, Crystal. And that's a good idea, maybe to go through each one. I've kind of gone through each one myself, and I see there are two that probably need some work about the water. So I want to just kind of run through these a little bit. So B, uses permitted outright. Does anyone have anything to say about that? I'm starting to talk to the page on page 9. It looks like the use of what he wants to do is applicable inside the 4C zone. Then provision of sewer and water is number D. It says sewer lines for new development shall connect to existing mains. Actually, D, which I don't think that's, correct me if anybody has anything to say about that. It looks like G is the first point that, where there's an issue. It says adequate utilities. All lots created to partitioning and subdivision shall have adequate public utilities and facilities such as sewer, gas, electric, and water systems located, constructed to prevent or minimize flood damage to the extent practicable to standards set forth in the City of Port Orford Design Standard. So basically, I'm reading this, if there's no public water, there's no partition. That's the rock.
I had something on the previous one.
Oh, you did, sorry.
That's okay.
Please, speak, please.
There's an option. Did Mr. Vernon say that he would cover the cost for the sewer lines? It says that the city could pay for it, but in this case, may consider sharing the cost of the main line extension or lift.
I don't think there's a main line extension. I think it runs right down the street. All he has to do is go to it. I think if they were going to extend it to another subdivision or something like that, that would be the issue there. I don't think that's an issue. So in my mind, that one and the one after it. So if I can kind of just lead this a little bit. G and E lot size. So the partition, basically the G is saying you've got to have public utilities or you can't partition it. That's kind of what I'm reading. E, or is it E that says that? No, yeah, no. So G is that. E is lot size. The minimum lot size shall be determined by the county health department as necessary for proper installation, operation of water supply and disposal systems. Oh, yes. So it can't be less than the ordinary lot size, which the flag lot would create a lot that was a little smaller than normal.
Well,
So you would have to have water to it in order to.
the 4C doesn't have a
There's no minimum.
minimum. So you can have a smaller lot.
If both a public and mutual water supply and a public disposal system are available. But if there is not one available, then there isn't one available. So if it's not available, you can't do it. So we have to make, that's what we're here to do, is make an accommodation so that he can do something. And what I'm seeing is that, and so my initial thought was, well, gee, we'll just have him hook up to the water system, bring it up to the house, and not use it until the moratorium is off, and then he's required to use it. And that would be not a problem, except that the moratorium says you can't even do the pipes.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my question. Once the moratorium's lifted, anyone who wants to do a well, would they then be required by the city to hook up to city water?
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe, so when I moved to Port Orford, and I wanted to live in the city because I don't want to have a well. I've had a well before. I don't want a well. I want utilities. So I think that's part of the deal, that when you come to a city, you get to have, and you have to have, the things that are for the common good. So in my mind, the applicant should pay for hooking up to the sewer or to the water, whether he wants to have a well or not. So that when the property's sold, somebody that buys it then gets what you get when you come to a city. Then you're not stuck out in the cold because you wanted to be in the city and have the benefits of being in the city. But if you're stuck with having a well, you go out. It doesn't seem to go with the city. Anyway, those are just some issues that I have been thinking about. Yes, Crystal.
I think one of the proposals, now the city council hasn't done this yet, but one of the proposals in front of the city council is that people would have to hook up within a certain amount of time after water is available, whether or not they had a well. That'll be up to the city council. I'll bring it.
And that was what I was going to suggest, is that, in the findings, we would say that the applicant or a future owner shall connect to the city water service when it becomes available, or within 30
Yeah, I
days or
think
whatever.
that- Or, yeah, whatever the city council says.
Well-
Because they're gonna be talking about
Okay.
that. And I believe, I mean, they're urged to make the same thing. So that it would, if it's 2 years or 4 years or whatever. Whether they do that, I don't, I can't assure you. But
It would also seem reasonable that the person developing the property should pay for it ahead of time, or have a bond or some surety that that's going to happen. So if the property is passed on, you're not stuck with something that's not known. And so I'm wondering if that's something
I
that,
don't know if that's on their proposal, but that my testimony could be done to them.
well, we're here making a decision today.
I
So,
know. We don't know it.
right.
Yeah, that would be up to the council's decision, not a decision we would make here
Right.
today. As to what the future water, whatever the water decision is, that's going to come from the council's decision. And my question at this point is, can this commission approve this subdivision contingent upon the decision of the council regarding water? So that this gentleman can proceed.
That's a great question. Crystal, do you think that we can make it contingent? Because
Yes, I
it seemed like we had to deal with the,
You said it.
That's why
Yes.
we've been asking. I mean, the city council didn't realize that I don't know. I should say that, but that's why we've been asking to have the council make a policy.
But I think that we could proceed with a motion to approve or disapprove this permit contingent upon the council's water policy.
I think that's a great idea. And my only question is in here, it says that we have to make our decision, that the applicant was subject to the conditions that were in existence at the time of the application. So I don't know if we can put this other layer of you have to's on it.
And is that a legal question? Is that something
That's something that's,
we need to consult with the city attorney before we could?
I think the council will be consulting with the city
Okay.
attorney. And we would have to condition this, that Mr. Vernon utilize the policy that the city council says.
So he couldn't move forward until that happened.
Well, he wouldn't be, I mean, he has a certain amount of time to do a final plan. Anyway. And so hopefully this would get, the council would deal with this fairly quickly, we hope. We wouldn't want to plat. We would want to make sure that the plat doesn't say something false. In other words, the plat should not say that city sewer and water is available. It should have some notes or something that says when it's available,
yeah.
that
So
it's being worked on, something, that would be it.
I would like to see that, the plat say, water must be provided when available. City water must be provided when available, and the owner would have the option of using the water from well or using the water, using the city water. They should be able to have the option. But, I mean, I'm sorry, Ms. Freeman left because that's the answer. You can put in a well, but you have to have a city hookup. You've got to have, you can't have a lot without water to it. But we're making an exception
Because we're in an emergency.
because we're in an emergency, exactly.
And the city's, the city council, if they're making a policy, they're going to say that. I mean, I doubt that it's just gonna be like, well, anybody can do this. It's going to be,
Yeah.
we're in an unusual situation, therefore we're suspending what the code says.
If I can speak, I believe it is within the authority of the planning commission to put forth recommendations to the city council. So if you know that they're already discussing this, perhaps you could come forth with your recommendations on, specific things you would like to see in the addendum.
Well, that's what we do. We can do that.
Okay.
So that could be after we do this.
Right, right. So more discussion on the issue. Or are there other parts of anything about this that do we need to go through each one of these? It looks like the erosion runoff, it looks like a lot of this stuff has been dealt with. But in the summary, on page 13, the specific items that the conditional approval are located, are listed. The pine tree, the runoff, the right of way, plat approval, so forth. And the confirmation that an alternative means of water will be available, that's the piece that we need to tweak.
Yeah.
And get to, so that Mr. Vernon can build his property. And we can, I understand we're not making a policy. We are dealing with one specific application. And it seems to me, I'm a very firm believer that that property should have a water hookup. If it isn't for the current owner, it should be for the future owners and people who move to a city for the utilities. So how we can do that is what I'd like to see.
I maintain that would be part of the council's decision. If he has a well, why, if there's well to the property, there's a source of water. If it conforms to the council's upcoming decisions. Anybody who wants to buy the property in the future, if they want to hook up to city water, they can pay to hook up to city water. Why place the burden on this property owner?
Well, it's not a huge burden. It's not a huge, it's a $10,000 burden, which you on a 200, 300, whatever. It's just, it's a blip. So, and what it does, it provides for the future. So that somebody else doesn't have this headache.
Okay.
And Tim, I think to answer that, it's because of the circumstances right now with the moratorium. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So it would be an automatic that anyone in the 4C would have to hook up. Yeah.
Code as it stands.
But the
I
city
see that
council may
point.
make that.
Yeah, so the city council may make that ruling.
Right.
Yeah. So if we were to just approve it, so Crystal, would you say that the findings, the summary of the findings here are without getting into the issue of any future owners or what the city council is going to do, this would suffice to allow him to proceed with the well?
I think that you'd want to make it one finding. You've got all these findings in here that Joseph has. Very, he's made good findings, in my opinion. And then you would have a finding that the pine tree shall be removed to the satisfaction of the fire department or the fire, not a department. Okay, and then you could say that something like that use of a well will be an alternative means of water at this time due to the moratorium on use of the city water. And that the applicant shall comply with the city council's policies that have not yet been determined prior to final plan.
And that would be, and you think that would pass the muster of the piece about the applicant abiding by the rules that were in place at the time of the application? I'm just trying to, my mother wanted me to be a lawyer. So my whole life, I have this little thing.
Well, I think the important thing is to say that he needs to comply with the policies set forth by the city council prior to final plat approval. So that whatever they decide for the city, that's
What he has
Okay.
to
what
do.
he has to do.
Okay,
So it'd be sort of confirmation for, contingent on the city council policy prior to plat approval.
And then, there's always, if they don't make a decision or something, then maybe there's some other thing that's gonna happen and Mr. Vernon would have to come back. Or go to
And
the
with
city
another-
council.
with his-
please come up to the microphone if you'd like to speak. I'd like to open it up open the hearing up again.
This seems kind of ironic, but just before the meeting, Joseph handed me this package, which is an approval to build a house on that property.
Real quick, it's an approval of the permit. I believe you still have to file it with county.
Well, the county is just, the city approved this for their standards, correct?
Yes.
The county reviews the plans for building codes and does the inspections. But as I was sitting here, we were arguing about this water, and I've just been issued approval to build a house that's gonna need the water right here. So it seems kind of, ironic. Can you see? It's like, okay, it's signed off by everybody. I've got approval to go forward and build.
Sir, there's a procedure that we go through. That's a separate, that building permit is separate from the water. Those are two specific different issues. And we're dealing with the water here. Any number of people could get, there are a number of house plans that would be approved for that property. And that's one of them.
I understand that, but I think it's an assumption that this house that you approved will have water, or you wouldn't issue a building permit. Isn't that correct? I mean, I can build a
I don't
house,
think, sir, you can make that assumption.
I can build a house with no water?
You can't build a house in the town without water.
Well, I just got the approval right here in my hand. It
Well,
says I can build a house
Well,
on
then,
that,
go
on the
build it.
piece of property that we're talking about. And so, I was just sitting here and I was like, this seems odd that I would get approval, a building permit approval.
Maybe
One
that
of
was
the-
handed to you a little early then.
Yeah, it
Well,
may
it's
have been
signed off and
one of the
it's done.
conditions for the approval on the building permit was that county would approve the well that was going in. So
So it's contingent then on the
the well going
well
in.
going in.
Anyway, I got the approval.
Contingent on the well going in.
Hmm?
It's approval contingent on the well going in.
Okay,
It's
so when I
within
put the well in,
conditions.
it's okay?
Yes, if you can get the well in and county says the well is, then I believe everything should be fine.
Wait a minute, wait,
Whoa,
wait,
whoa,
wait,
whoa,
wait,
okay,
hold on
okay,
here.
that may have been a little.
Hold on. This is
Affirmative.
This is we are in a legal hearing here about whether you can bypass a rule requiring water, city water on a partition.
Correct.
And city water on a piece of property that's smaller, that's smaller than the normal lot size.
No, it isn't.
Both are
In that
dependent.
zone. No, I disagree with you, Greg.
Both are.
The parcel in that zone, there is no minimum lot size. There, you can have a 1,000 square foot lot if you would like. It's right in your code.
I just read the code a few minutes ago.
Well, read it again.
I read it here
because
publicly.
I respectfully disagree with what you're saying.
On page 10, thank you. Lot size,
Okay.
except as provided in sections in a 4C zone, the minimum lot size shall be determined by the county health department as necessary for proper installation and operation of water supply and disposal systems. If both mutual water supply and a public disposal system are available, there shall be no minimum lot area.
Right, and so.
They are not. There is no public mutual water supply available for that property. That's why we're here, sir.
All right.
Thank you for speaking. Is that,
In addition, the reason that he can build on that property now before the petitioning is because it's a piece of property and anybody can build a house on a piece of property that they have. If he couldn't get it within the 3,000 something square feet he is required, then he wouldn't be able to go through with the petition.
I have a question. Joseph, I think I heard Joseph say that he approved a well. Is that what you're saying? Did you say?
No, I said I approved the building permit conditional upon county approving the well.
But we don't, we're speaking today about we don't have the authority to approve a well.
But this says minimum lot size is tied to.
The county health department
Right.
determining it.
I'd like to get back to the motion or the findings that Crystal was about the use of a well. As a means of water.
I think Commissioner Rossi has a question.
Mr. Rossi?
So addressing the findings, I agree with Joseph's findings by and large. I think they're great. How do we add a finding? Is that a motion or?
Yeah, you can suggest a finding
I would like to suggest a finding.
and then you could do it by motion.
The wording I would suggest is use of a well will be an alternative means of water if in conformance with findings of council at the time of final plat approval.
Would you say that again?
Use of a well will be an alternative means of water if in conformance with findings of council at time of final plat approval.
How about with the policy?
Policy, yes. With policy, yes. And council's policy will determine if it's necessary to be hooked up to city water. And that will address your concern, which I totally see. I see your point, Greg.
Yes.
About the hookup, because that conforms to standing policy. Standing, yeah. So, but that's on the council. That's not part of our decision
not.
today.
It's
It's not a
not
great
part of our
decision.
decision, but it could be something we,
But we can
Advise
recommend,
and
yes, we
recommend.
can go on to recommend. But in the interest of moving forward with this application, I would like to add that finding.
So why don't you make a motion?
I make a motion that we add a finding that use of a well will be an alternative means of water if in conformance with policy of council at time of final plat approval. You like that?
Prior to plat approval? Final plat approval, this is the tentative plat.
Yeah, this is tentative.
Seems like the plat, that official plat thing, this was a temporary, that seems like it's a real legal thing that you kind of have to want to be just the way it's supposed to be.
Right. The final plat is supposed to look just like the tentative plat, either the one that they present or the one that is worked out through the findings.
So we have a motion, is there a second? I'll second it. Discussion.
I would agree with it. I do believe that we should be clear about our recommendation of hookup to water once the moratorium is lifted and it's available. And I say that because we are defining this as an alternative water source.
Other discussion on the motion? I'm going to call for a vote. Commissioner Barron,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Rossi,
Yes.
Commissioner Thiel is a yes.
Yeah, I would like to suggest one more. I think that the plat needs to, maybe Walter can figure out some words to put on the plat of the fact that at the time of approval, water was not tentative approval or something, or it would be final on the final one if it's still the case. That water, city water was not available. So that the plat reflects the situation at this time and that wells were.
Yeah, there's a place for the city council, the city has to sign it off.
I just think it's important because you don't want, you want to keep the history clear on the property. And if they don't make you get rid of the wells, then there would be a well in use as long as people wanted to until they signed up with the city, but the city needs to know that.
So by including it on the plat, you're documenting that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I don't know how to state that, maybe one of you. Just the plat,
So
the tentative and final reflect the conditions of water at the time. That, something like that.
the tentative and final plat be, note the conditions of the,
Yeah. I mean, if we're still in a moratorium, that, and they could,
right.
Yeah. so that we don't just, have a plat that says something untrue, like sewer and water, or we don't want to say that.
Could there be a note that says at the time the plat was created? If necessary,
Yeah,
they could
it
say
needs to be.
that at the time the plat was created, city water was not available, but
Features.
do a storage, but is required by city code. Or,
Well, I think it might be better to say, we don't know, what the council's gonna say. But I think that it's just a note to say that at the time of that plat, there wasn't city water and
oh,
there was an alternative. The alternative was a well. I mean, they can word it out.
oh, so we're just,
Creating a
Offering.
record.
we're creating a record and making a recommendation to the person doing the plat that it be noted on the,
Right.
okay, so,
Because you don't want your title reports and everything to be
Right.
wrong.
right. Uh,
So do we need a motion for
I
that?
think so.
yeah,
Okay.
anybody got that in their head?
I think you have to leave it kind of open-ended because Walter is going to be the one, that's probably
Mhm.
Walter.
And it should be done right.
Yeah, they want.
Yeah.
It should be done, but
So,
just a notation about the water situation that is applicable to the plat.
Okay, so how does this sound? For both temporary and final plat, there
Not-
should be
not
a
temporary,
notation.
Tentative.
Oh,
That's-
tentative, sorry. Um,
Well, this is the tentative, so it'll be on the.
Okay, so for both tentative and final plat, there should be a note that the city was not city water was not available and an alternative water source is recommended or allowed
Under consideration.
under
Well,
consideration.
at the time of the final plat, it will be resolved what.
hopefully,
How about alternative water sources were explored by the planning commission
It's the city council.
or the city council?
so do we have a wording on that? What is the wording?
Yeah. So I'll make a motion that both tentative and final plats should contain a note. Final.
This is the tentative.
Oh, okay, all right.
Sorry.
All right. So for the final plat, a note that city water was not available and an alternative water source is under consideration. It will be done. Okay. So an alternative water source,
Well.
okay,
I mean, that would be.
okay, so an alternative water source is permitted. Because he does have backup. Right, well, when he doesn't want that.
Okay, we have a motion.
Yes,
Is that a motion?
that's a motion.
Do we have a second?
I second
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
it.
Commissioner
Highly
Ross?
unlike-
Yep.
Yes,
Commissioner Rossi?
yes.
Commissioner Lovendall?
Yes.
Commissioner Burnt?
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen, yes. Thank you, Commissioner Lovendall.
One question. Highly unlikely that our water situation would be resolved, but should it be resolved at that time of his final plat, would he then, then he would have to do the city?
I don't know, he might want it because he might want to use that well. I mean, he may not want
Yeah.
to switch over, and if the city council gives him the new owners 5 years or something like that, then he might want to use it.
I don't think there's any restriction on having a well. You just have to have city water, that's the law. Other people have, and I know somebody who wants to get a well just in case there's a tsunami. Are there other conditions that we may want to look at here? Has everyone looked at the conditions and are we happy with this?
Could someone explain the flag lot? Does that pertain to the street name?
No, a flag lot, let me pull it up. You might not be able to see it, but on page 21, on the plat, you might see that the lot in question, called parcel 2, has a 20-foot access coming off of it. The shape of the lot is why it's referred to as a flag lot. The 20-foot access would be like the pole, and then the lot itself would be the flag. It's just, it is a piece of property that is basically only accessible through a driveway or an easement.
Come to my house, I live on a flag lot. It's 2 lots, it's one deep lot, and they just cut it and they run a driveway up the side, so it's shaped like a flag.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody doesn't allow. Puerto Rico doesn't allow.
Okay.
So we are at the, this is the end of this. So we have made 2 motions.
And then are you accepting the
We are
other
accepting,
conditions?
yes. So should we vote on those also?
I think you should say that you will accept
We will accept the,
staff reports.
we'll accept this.
Staff reports, needs and conditions.
Do we have a motion to accept the staff report conditions and findings?
I'll make a motion to accept the staff reports and findings.
A second?
Discussion?
What did you say?
Made a motion to accept staff reports and findings
Staff report, findings and conditions.
and conditions.
That's
And you could correct me if I'm wrong, you might want to even include the specifier of including the additional conditions that the planning commission has set forth during this meeting. Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Rossi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Byrne,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen is yes. So is that the end of it, Crystal?
That's the end of this one.
Thank you. Thank you for Mr. Byrne for showing up, and I appreciate you wanting to build property in town.
If you want to stay for their recommendations, are you going to be planning to make some recommendations to the city council? If so, you might want to plan what you're going to make as recommendations following this public hearing.
That's probably a good idea.
Or if you want people to testify on it, then you can keep the public hearing open and people want to talk.
Well, that's a good idea. Why not? This is a public body. So I'm going to keep this open, and if anyone would like to speak 3 minutes to what we should recommend to the city council. Speak now. Please come up and speak, sir.
Yeah, I agree with your, I don't know, statement about if you live in the city, you should go to the city sewer and city water. I think that the mechanism to do that, I'm not sure what's legal. And so that, I'm not a lawyer, and so, but I do think that the recommendation should include if and when services are, and for several reasons, I agree with what you say. Most people that live in the city don't want to mess with the well. I don't want to mess with it, right? but unfortunately, it's the only way we could do it. And so I think that wells should be looked at as that you will need the support of every user to pay into the city so they can, they do what the city does. And so if you get a number of people that aren't using city water, they're not going to be paying for the water. And that's going to, it's like a business, it limits that. So I absolutely agree with what you say. I'm not sure what the legal mechanism is for, but that would be my recommendation. That when people do agree to do these wells, it is as a temporary situation. And, anyway, so that would, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you.
I think that's a very good, I live in the city and I would much rather have city service than mess with a well.
Anyone else like to speak?
I want to just piggyback on what he said. I think that's very important, that this is a temporary measure and that people are required to come back and use city because we need support for the infrastructure. We'll need that, as stated, and this is not a forever. It's just a temporary, and they should be required to hook up to city.
So, so I think we should make a recommendation to the council. Temporary. I guess there's no one has ever questioned, or actually, the Speaker Freeman questioned whether you can have a well. I don't think having a well is an issue. Anybody can have a well, as far as I know.
I don't know.
But
I don't believe it's expressly prohibited.
it's not prohibited, yeah.
Well, I think it also may pertain to location. So, for instance, I know there are still septic systems in place out near Garrison Lake. So drilling a well in a spot out there
Right.
might become an issue.
So I'm writing something. So any wells approved as an alternative to city water under the moratorium should be should be temporary.
I consider it temporary.
Be considered temporary. And that's one. Two is all city properties must have city water service.
Already
That's on the book, but that temporary, those who have temporary alternative water.
I like two because it reaffirms why we're doing the first one. All city lots should continue to be required to have city water.
City water and sewer.
Yeah. Or all city, not properties or houses, lots, developments. Continue to be required to have public sewer and water. And is lots the correct term, or is it developed?
There's legal lots. And that's what you can do, legal lots. So you could say all city legal lots.
Right, except that you could buy a lot and not have to have water on it until you build on it.
Right.
I'm drawing a distinction there.
Legal, okay.
all developed lots.
All lots undergoing development.
In developed lots,
When developed,
or
all city lots should be required to have
When
public
developed?
sewer and water when developed.
Yes. When developed. So all city lots, so I'm saying all city lots should continue to be required to have public sewer and water when developed. And the first one was any wells approved as an alternative to city water under the moratorium should be considered temporary.
You actually did 3 of them. You did number 1, if and when water services are available.
Oh,
Citizens should be required to have city hookups. I sound like Dr. Fauci. I hate
could, would you repeat that, please?
So, if and when water service is available, citizens should be required to have city hookups.
Right.
Number 2, wells approved under the moratorium should be considered temporary. Number 3, all city lots should continue to be required to have public sewer and water.
Thank you.
Then the question becomes, who is going to carry this message to?
I'll do it.
Okay. So would you like me to type up what I
Would you
have and see if it
please?
agrees with what you have when I get back to
Thank
the
you.
office? And then you can look
And if you could put it
See if
on
it
your
says what you thought
letterhead,
it
or
said.
if you could put it on something that's,
at it.
then I can officially give it to, and it can officially be on the
Okay.
agenda, and I will actually come and speak to it.
We'll just use some photo. Letterhead like Joseph and I make up for these things.
I have a question. I'm just wondering if we should slip in when developed, when permitted to be developed.
We permitted for development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Permitted for development.
Are you still accepting recommendations or suggestions?
If you'd like to come up here and speak, please do.
Penny Cease, 834 Deedy Street in Port Orford. All I wanted to say is I have a concern about all of these wells that are being allowed through planning clearance up to this point. So to make this policy retrospective back to the beginning of the water curtailment might be a suggestion you could make to the council. I don't know if they're considering that, but right now, I know that the property next to me has been allowed to have a well as their water source.
So retroactive.
Yes, retroactive, it seems to me, would be something to consider. Anything that has been permitted through planning in Port Orford in the last however many months it's been since the beginning of the water curtailment plan.
Oh, you're suggesting that some were done by planning and not the planning commission, because we haven't seen any.
That's correct. They were administratively approved by Jessica to have wells as their water source because water wasn't available from the city. And so I'm concerned about those being allowed to go forward when the policy might change. And from this point on, people wouldn't be allowed to have a well as their primary source. We're presuming that's going to happen, that it would only be an alternative.
I'm not certain that the term retroactive needs to even be in there. If the,
What do you do about something that's been approved and through planning and has already gone to the county and is in their building? I don't,
Yeah.
if you don't make it retroactive, then you're going to have a bunch of lots in town that have wells as their water source.
I think we're going to need to talk with Shayla about whether you can do something like that retroactively, but it's worth a look.
Well, I'm suggesting that you recommend it, whether it can be done or not, but just bring it up,
Okay.
bring it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. I think that at one time, people had wells up on Coast Guard Hill, and then water came in, and then they were required to hook up, if I'm not mistaken, they were required to hook up the city. Some of them still have the well, but they were required at the time to hook up to the city.
What
So I
time frame? 2030.
It was, I don't know when that occurred.
Okay.
I do know about that. We should look into that. I think retroactively that would be wise.
So maybe we need to say something to the effect that, once the moratorium has lifted, people need to comply with the city policy of hookup, regardless of when they were issued their permit to build and to drill a well.
It certainly would be something to propose.
And
We're-
then,
we're
I
not-
mean, that's essentially the same as saying retroactive, but we're saying they still need to comply with that.
Did you get that by chance?
I'm trying.
Retroactive.
Could you read what that was?
When the moratorium is lifted, residents, citizens, homeowners, whatever, I don't know.
Property owner.
Property
Property owners. Shall be required, should be required. Should be,
Shall, or should, yeah.
it should because we're not doing
We're
it.
just
but then
recommending.
Should be required to comply or to
Coming to compliance.
come into compliance.
Because it is a city policy.
Yeah, by with utilization of citywide.
Coming to, or coming to compliance with
The city
City water standards.
city code requiring sewer and water.
compliance with city codes. Requiring water.
Water hookups, yes.
We didn't know how deeply we were gonna get in this.
Well, this is the fun part, because we're citizens making recommendations.
Okay, I will try to get this
So,
typed up and to you.
okay, and I'd like to vote on that. And so, would you read it? First one I didn't get very well.
Do you want them all? Or just this one? This last
Just this one here, just our recommendation.
one. When the water moratorium is lifted.
If and when the water moratorium is lifted, if and when the water, when the water moratorium is lifted.
Property owners need to comply. Property owners should be required
Oh, yeah.
to come into compliance with city codes requiring water.
That was the last one, and then, does that, we don't need the other ones then, or do we?
Which other one?
Well, any wells approved as alternative to city water should be considered temporary.
Well, I think that you wanted all those.
Yeah, I think it sort of leads up
Well,
to,
we did vote on those, didn't we?
Yeah.
Okay, good, okay, so then when the, so,
When the moratorium is lifted.
so I'll make a motion, when the moratorium is lifted, property owners should be required to come into compliance with city codes requiring water hookups.
Second.
Discussion. Commissioner Rossi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
yes.
Commissioner Byrne,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen is yes. And thank you to our speaker.
I have a question about wells in general that Ms. Freeman brought up. She was speaking about having a well putting a well in. She has city water, but she wants to put a well in for other reasons. I think we're talking about new developments and new, we're not suggesting people can start putting in wells as an alternative, because our aquifer would be greatly impacted.
I don't think, I think the issue is hookups, new hookups. You have to have, the code says you have to have a hookup. You can do whatever else you want to do, but you gotta have a hookup. That's what, the code doesn't say anything about wells. You can have a well, people have wells. I know somebody who wants to put in a well.
I do too. I know a couple of them.
That's another issue.
Yeah, that is
It's a
another
separate issue, which, and we have other agenda items. Can we, I hope, I'd
No,
like to.
I'm
be able
just
to-
saying.
Yeah, I'd like to move on. So thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you.
And,
Yeah.
I have an agenda here. Thank you, Crystal. I'm closing that hearing. Other business, consideration of planning commission application of Bailey Reinhold. The city lost her application. And I haven't heard from her.
Well,
So let's move on. Maybe she'll apply again.
She was on the call earlier. It appears that she has left though.
Oh, okay. Letter to common,
Maybe somebody.
Yeah.
I do not have her number.
I don't have her number. Does anybody have it?
Nobody has her
I
number.
might.
I would have called her.
I'm pretty sure I have her number on some old stuff. Oh, I probably threw it away. It's on, she testified on the Hyde stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
well, Pamela, do you have a number? I have a number. Bailey was on this commission.
Yeah.
Bailey was on the
I
commission.
got her
She-
number.
This meeting would have been the end of the 2-year term.
Right.
So she has previously applied, been accepted, and approved by council.
She did resign. So,
Okay.
yeah, she did resign and she was replaced. So Pamela, can you call her? I would, and encourage her if she's interested to submit another application. And I think probably Joseph will be tracking it. He was not the person tracking that application when it was lost. So I think Joseph's on it.
I certainly hope so. And if not, then you can definitely blame me for the next one.
All right.
I haven't noticed that you've lost me.
Okay.
Other than my marbles.
Remember that?
Then other business, item B, letter to common council, STR recommendations. So that letter is not to the common council. It's just a letter because the commission gets to make recommendations, make any recommendation we want. So that's just a misnomer, although it
Is
is,
that a letter that's in there?
it's in here. It's on page. It's at the very last.
Page 35.
Page 35. I'll just introduce it. I wrote this letter because we all know the Curry County Commissioners and Planners passed a ordinance that affected our urban growth boundary. And two of the items that were in that felt really egregious to me, and I wanted to address them, and I wanted the planning commission to go on record if we felt we should. And so I spoke with Mr. Milliman, the interim administrator, and asked him if it would be appropriate for us to write a letter and to publicly take a position on this. And he said it would be totally great if we did that. So I just took that as a yes, and I put this letter up. And if we would like to discuss it and pass it, I would be happy to discuss it. Anybody have anything to say on that?
I'll move that we accept this letter and forward it on to the planning commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rossi, seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on the letter? Yes, please.
Well, would you want to do this and ask the council to do the same thing?
It's a good idea. Yeah, I think
I
asking
mean,
the council to
we're
do it all.
asking the county board of commissioners to do something. It seems like the council is more at their level.
Well, the council already sent a representative down and spoke against it.
Oh, okay.
They've already said their
I
piece.
see. Okay.
Yeah, and it didn't do a dang thing. So I'd like to, I'd like to have our planning commission have some ground to toss. So, any more discussion? And thank you. Commissioner Rossi,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovendall,
Yes.
Commissioner Byrne,
Yes.
Commissioner Thielen is a yes. Thank you. Ed sign application. I saw this application and I looked through the code and I didn't see anything that it looked like the planning commission would need to weigh in on. It looked like it was fell within the bounds of the code. I did notice that there was one issue that could be possible is there's a kind of a corner restriction on
Page 199 of our code.
page, thank you, page 199 of our code. It states that where a driveway meets a street right of way, there has to be 10 feet back up the driveway and 40 feet down the right of way of the main artery that the sign cannot appear in. But I was thinking that could just be something that the planners can just.
Vision clearance.
Vision clearance, yeah, could just specify. We wouldn't need to vote on it. So is that noted?
Yeah, I'll make note of it.
Good, and then so you can just figure that out.
Because the sign ordinance is no longer part of the land. So it used to be,
Yeah.
and we wanted to separate it.
So
It couldn't be appealed.
I would think you probably want to talk and find out where, a legal description of where the right of way is, and what that really means, where the measurement starts from and all that. That looked like the only thing that was
Yes.
an issue for me. Yeah, maybe.
Just a matter of specifically how far.
Okay, thank you for that. And then announcements and communications. Do we have city planner comments?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So,
City planner
Number one,
comments.
I'm gonna work with Joseph to clean up the agenda because we have things in weird positions and really, I don't think usually that planning commissioners and elected bodies do additions to the agenda at the beginning. Unless you feel it's really important. I mean, we used to have on there additions and is the agenda okay? I mean, you don't approve the agenda when we have to take things in. Intake from the citizen. So I don't care if you want to add something to the agenda, but no cities don't allow you to take things off the agenda because when we're under rules that we're supposed to be bringing things forward.
Are you speaking to hearings or just meetings in general?
The things on the city agenda are not Joseph and I deciding
Right.
what they're things that have come into us and they're under our.
Right.
So I've never worked in any other city. This was something that happened under our last planning commission chair. I've never seen that on any city agenda,
Okay.
although I work in a lot of cities. So, I mean, they might have additions, but this idea that you have to say whether you want to deal with this agenda or not. I mean, you might not want to deal with the agenda, but you have to. You have to. And so, also,
Okay, so you're suggesting that we strike number 2 off of our agenda. Okay. That seems fair.
I mean, there might be some other thing where you want planning commissioners to see if there's something that they want to add to the agenda or something. Or you might want to do that after the public hearing. I don't know.
Well,
whatever, however you want.
and I'll just say that if people get to me with a compelling argument for an agenda item before the deadline for the agenda, I'll put it on there. I'm not, that's what we're here to do.
And then also, I don't see why we have announcements and communications twice, so I think that needs to be cleaned up.
Okay.
The city planner shouldn't be doing comments before and after the public hearing. The public hearing should be the first thing, or thereabouts.
I would like to see, well, I'd like to see commissioner comments, the chair comments.
Yeah, that should be
At
on
the
there.
top, yeah, okay. I always have lots of.
And I'll look at some other cities.
Okay, I like recommendations too, and those that I've gone around about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And, public hearings should be. And then comments from the public, I don't understand this agenda items only unless considerations are down here.
That's the way we do it, that's the way the city council is. You can only speak, you can speak in the beginning of the meeting to the agenda items, and then afterwards, it's
But
like,
they don't, they have a separate.
it's called something, they're not hearings. No, it's not, it's just, it's under other business, it's called, complaints.
Like we were doing a.
yeah, well, that's something legislative, or,
Right.
yeah.
So otherwise, that was that. Okay, and then, two things. When you get your new members, I did do planners training. Way from, she's our field rep, who's also wanting to do planning training for you guys. And I told Wade that I thought it would be good to have both. Because you're supposed to hear something 7 times before you remember it anyway, and that's usually the case. And so I thought, if you want to do mine, mine's a little shorter, I think. Sometimes the state goes more into background. Then I could just do that one of these months, and then maybe 3 or 4 months down the line, Way could do one, and it'd probably be more meaningful because you've had more experience. And more time on council. And I would like to know if you are up for both of these.
And that would be during regular planning commission.
Yeah, we would try to schedule,
Mhm.
we'll try to schedule them when we don't have a lot of. We do have another partitioning similar to this one. We'll be doing that next month.
Okay.
Okay.
And we have some more things that are kind of perking out there. So we'll have some more things for the next few months. But I think this is great, what you guys did with the Vernon one. I think it's a model, and we can use the same thing for next month's. And by then, we might even have a policy, I don't know. Give them,
Great.
I think it's good to go through that and get to that. I just didn't see any other way. I'm glad you guys were up for it.
Yeah.
And then one other thing. So Guy Vernon was talking about housing updates, and the city invested quite a bit of money in me doing housing updates in 2022. I mean, months of coming back with housing. And then when I said I needed a new contract in August, that didn't happen. And I kept saying, well, I can come back and do the housing updates, and they never did schedule it. So I didn't know if the council decided they didn't want to do housing updates. You know, maybe they didn't because maybe that was going to allow more housing and without water. You know, I don't know. I don't know how all this works together. Nobody knows. But I don't know if you still want those housing updates, because if I go back to try to bring them forward now, after close to a year, I'm gonna have to spend more time. Because they're-
So
Can I ask-
when you talk about housing updates, are you talking about like ADUs
All kinds
and
of stuff that we were working on in our.
small villages.
Right, and,
Okay.
stuff that Arnon was,
Yeah,
said we never did.
exactly.
I didn't know why. we
I
didn't do
wondered
it.
where all of that was left.
It just never came back to me, and
The answer is yes, we do, and we have,
Yes.
we have independently spoken of that. We want ADUs, we want to talk about, we want to finish ADUs, we have also identified, we have other topics too, but ADUs is one.
well, and then that
The
cluster,
cluster housing, or
and
the
I
planned unit development.
yeah, I think I would change that, the name of it. People don't like planned unit development. That's why Guy Vernon was against it, I think. But it was all the same stuff. It was just using our own code that we already had to expand our ability to do this.
Yes, I think housing is a big issue here. And we want to work on it.
And we have
And-
certain things that aren't even up to the state. They don't meet the state definitions, like, I'm not sure if RV park is one. There was quite a few that I came across. Family, we said family, people living together had to be related by blood. I mean, all kinds of,
Yeah, yeah, there were antiquated
yeah.
terms.
And we've dealt with a number of those.
Yeah,
and
I
we
just-
want to finish
I
that.
just felt bad because it's like,
Mhm.
after all these years of working here, and this needed to be done, finally the city invested in it. And then it was,
And it's hard when you hear someone say they've waited for a year and nothing has happened. Because we did spend a lot of discussion hours on these items. And now it's been mandated by the governor of Oregon
Yeah.
that we address housing.
well, then I'm thinking that maybe, after we get some of these other applications that have been lying around taken care of, and Joseph will be up to speed to be doing staff reports, then maybe I can work on some of them. And I would think by late summer.
Great, that sounds really
Yeah.
good.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would feel much better. It just seemed like, I mean, I almost cried once. It was like, so all these years we wait to invest some money in some things that need to be done. And then we kind of are almost there. We were ready to have the hearing, and it just kind
I think we just moved
of flew
forward.
away.
Well, thank you for your service, and I'm glad you're back.
Building permit. Someone comes in with a building permit and you don't have city water and they check off the well. And Joseph, does he have the authority to approve a well? But we haven't really, at this time, and see, and that's what got Guy all excited about. And so that's a question, because it seems like,
Well, I think you can't stop unless you put a moratorium on building permits, which you can't.
right,
But, I mean, I told Joseph, for what it's worth, I don't know what Gary Milliman suggested to him or what the new county council that's going to be coming and working with the city. That'll be a good thing because he can help formulate some of this stuff. But, I told Joseph, I'm not doing it. I am a private contractor. And no way am I gonna go in and make policy in the city. I said, if Gary Milliman, and I'm not insured to do that kind of stuff. I mean, a
Yeah.
city has cover that allows them to make mistakes. I don't have such a cover. I have a little policy that would probably break me if I got into a real law.
So
But
Joseph, I know you're
I-
kind of new with this. I
Mhm.
mean, for the city here, but has anyone asked you to put something in writing when you hand them a stack of papers and permission to proceed to the next step?
my response to that, I believe, would be I have actually drafted a document that is now being put into the planning packets. That is the one that addresses the provisions for the land hasn't been divided in the previous 5 years and won't be for the next 5. So I have a little bit of experience with drafting those sorts of documents. Am I not understanding the core of your question?
Well, I think that.
I'm
when we
gonna
run into-
draw this to a close because
Okay.
this is not a topic. This is,
Yeah,
we're
sorry.
not, we're off topic here. And it's a great conversation, but we're having a meeting with, we're on record and all that. I want to move forward. Are there public considerations? Please come forward.
Penny Cease, 834 Deedy Street in Port Orford. I just wanted to bring forward some information and I didn't get a chance to say anything when you were approving your letter to the county about the zoning amendments. But I just want to say a couple things and then ask a question. That appeal of those zoning amendments to LUBA, as you know, happened. Today was the oral argument. There will be a decision on by June 1st. And at that point, it will either be upheld, and that means the county will have no incentive to make any changes because what they've done has been upheld by LUBA, or it will be stricken completely, which is unlikely, or it will be parts or the whole thing will be remanded to the county to deal with again. So at this point, writing a letter saying, you know, consider these things, it may just be sort of ill-timed, and you may want to wait until there's a remand to do that. Or if there's no remand, then you might want to send your letter. But at this point, it's sort of like it's going to go into the void, is my feeling. And let's see. And also, if you want to send the letter, maybe you can consider asking them for a cap on STRs, because that's something that they haven't committed to yet, and it's going to be important. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes. Hello, I'm Dana Gurney. I live at 834 Dean Street in Port Orford. A while ago, you were asking for recommendations for the city council, and I didn't know if they pertain only to water or to other matters. But one thing I would like you to suggest is that all applications for development in Port Orford shall be publicized on the city's website, regardless of how simple they seem, regardless of if they're straightforward administrative matters. But people in Port Orford deserve to know what is going on any application before the planning department. And I think this is done in many jurisdictions, such as the county and cities. You can find out what's going on. Because I'm tired of submitting information requests to the city administrator and not getting any answers at all. And I think that we have a real opportunity here for change. And there you go. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else online or in the woodwork?
It does not appear that there's anyone online.
And I'm going to adjourn this meeting as of 5:40 p.m. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, that's okay. Mr. Chair.